All right, what is going on, everybody? In this video, I'm going to show you how to comp land, okay? The reason I'm making this video is because so many people have trouble with, okay, what do I do when I'm looking at land? Like, what do I look for? How do, if it's a good deal, bad deal, all that type of stuff, okay? So we're going to go look at property from a client that sold back in December, and I'm just going to show you that thought process, okay? So let's check it out. So this was the property, okay? It's in Hamilton County, Florida. It's already sold, so no one trying to snipe the deal. It's too late. It's already been done, okay? Now, I want to just take you through the thought process that I have when I'm looking at something like this, okay? First and foremost, you need to have land ID. It's like $49 a month. If you don't have it, get it. Okay, it tells us extremely valuable information from the zoning, wetlands, flood zones, like a bunch of stuff you need, okay? The very first thing that I do is I just put it in here. So I'll put Florida, I'll put the county, and then I put the ID in, which is the parcel ID. You can also search by owner name and address, but I like to do the ID. Now, if it doesn't come up, I'll use the other one. So first thing I do is I'm just going to look at the property itself. See, does anything stand out? Is there anything weird going on with it? Okay, so as I'm looking, I'm like, no, nothing looks weird. It's got really good road frontage, okay? This is phenomenal road frontage. We see it's 5 acre, okay, so it's got road frontage on both sides. I like to look around the neighbors too and see, is there anything kind of like weird going on? Because sometimes neighbors' properties can affect its selling. You might not think about that, but think about if you're buying a house, right? Imagine you go buy a house and like your neighbor next to you is like crazy, and they've got, I don't know, they're coming outside and doing wacky stuff, and that might turn you off to that area, okay? And so for a property like this, especially like a 5 acre, like someone's probably going to build out here. You know what I mean? Like they're probably going to build and then have some area to roam. Like it's probably not just going to be for recreational stuff, so they're going to kind of care about that stuff. If it's a bigger piece, 10, 20, 30, 40 acres, et cetera, people don't care as much about the neighbors because it's more spread out, but in this, they will. So this is kind of weird. Like what the heck is going on this other person's property? That's why we need to have realtors that go out there and check for us, right? Like you don't need to go out to the land yourself. You get realtors to do it. That's, one of the things we help people with, but I would definitely want them to be like, hey, what does it look like around there? Okay, so that looks good. The next thing you could do on land ID is you can make it 3D. So you want to make sure the land is flat, right? That it's usable. It's okay if it's rolling sometimes, but what you don't want is something on like a cliff, right? Where you're going to, you can't even use it. You fall off. That's not what I want. This is good, okay? This is in Florida. Obviously, most of Florida is pretty flat, so we don't really need to worry about that. The next thing is I like to hit the water tab. And I want to see, okay, is there any surface water, floodplains, wetlands? Surface water would be like, is there a lake on it, right? A floodplain is a floodplain, and wetlands are wetlands, right? It's pretty simple stuff. This doesn't have it, so like we're good to go there, okay? All right. Now, you can see this is when they bought it. This is what they bought it for, and they sold it for, I believe, let's see. Yeah, they sold it for 43. So they bought it for 21, sold it for 30. That's a good deal. Anyways, there's information here like the legal description, stuff like that, okay? It'll say tax amount. You can also call and get that information. And then utilities. So that's something that you just need to call on. You just call the county or the city and say, hey, do you have water out here? You got sewer? What's going on specifically? That's easy. You just do a Google search for the county and ask. And then if it runs on well and septic, it runs on well and septic, okay? Now for perk tests, so look, this is really important. If you don't know what this is, I'll explain it. So a perk test basically tests the soil to see if it's suitable for a septic system, okay? The only time that you need to do that is if it doesn't have city or county sewer, okay? So basically a septic, think of it like the same as a sewer, okay? It's not provided by the county or the city, okay? If it comes with city or county sewer, you don't need to worry about a perk test, okay? But if it doesn't have that, you may want to get one. Now, I'll be frank with you. It really depends on the deal that you're doing and how you're doing the deal and the state that you're in. States like North Carolina, it tends to have a lot more issues with soils not perking, basically meaning it's not suitable for septic system. The problem with that is if it's not suitable, you basically have to get an alternative type of septic system, which can be more expensive to install, and it turns some buyers off, et cetera. That's why we do that in the first place, okay? Now, the way that I work with this is it's not like, oh, every property just get a perk test, right? It depends on the size. It depends on what you're doing. If you're going to be double closing, which is basically wholesaling the deal and just throw it on the market, you should put no money into the deal. Okay, you should pay for perk test. Let the end buyer do that. Okay, but if it's something you're going to buy outright, you're going to own, or you're going to use a funder's money, they may want you to get a perk test, which you can. Perk tests, they vary in price. It could be $200, it could be $1,000 or so. Really just depends. Okay, but that's important because you don't want to get stuck with a property that doesn't perk. Because let's say hypothetically they bought this property, they didn't get a perk test, and then they go to sell it, and then the buyer who's thinking about buying it gets a perk test, say it doesn't perk. That could be a big problem. It's going to reduce the value, okay? So that's the really, really important thing with vacant land you have to keep in mind, okay? Now, the point on that, though, that's important is that, like, if you're doing big rural recreational properties, 20, 30, 40 acres, it's like you probably don't need that because someone's probably just going to get that for, more hunting purposes. And to be frank, there's probably a lot of spots that will perk. So it's not necessary. If you're doing something that's a bit smaller, I think say 10 acres under, it's smart to get a perk test. Now, if you're doing something that's an infill lot where it's an acre under and the only point is to build on it, you absolutely need a perk test if it doesn't have sewer rating, okay? Because if that does not perk, it's going to really hurt the value, like tremendously. I mean, it almost makes it worthless. So that's something like you really need to keep in mind, okay? Now, in terms of other due diligence stuff, like I said, this has a tax, you can call and see if there's back taxes. You don't need to do your own title work. That's why you send it to a title company. Like you don't need to waste your time on that. What I care about is I'm looking at the property characteristics. Okay, is the shape okay? Is it not sloped? Right? What does it seem like with the neighbors? And then I'm looking at flood zone, wetlands, stuff like that. What I really care about is price. Like what is the price of this? And then the actual like hardcore due diligence of someone going out there and making sure there's nothing wrong with the property. I leave that up to the realtor who's going to go out there before we close on it. So before we buy it, right, they're going to go out there to make sure. Because here's the one thing, we're looking at aerial images. These are usually a few years back. It's possible that this might not be what it looks like out there. Meaning, like, what if they actually cleared it, right? And this isn't, up-to-date photos. Or what if they go out there and there's like an abandoned shack on it? Or what if they go out there and, someone put a trailer on it? Like, there's a million things. So that's why you have a realtor always go out there, okay? So this is done, right? I don't need to like go hog wild and try and like, do some crazy due diligence again. Like, don't do your own title work. It's stupid. Just have a title company do that. The next thing is I want to see, what do I think this will sell for? Okay. So what I do is I go to Redfin. Okay. I type in the county. All right. And then I'm going to go to sold filter. I'm going to go to land. And because it's a 5 acre, I'm going to look at the 5 to 10 acre range. Okay. And I'm going to go to last year. All right. Now, obviously this is already sold, so we know what it's sold for, but I'm going to pretend it didn't to run the comps. First, what I'm going to do on here is I'm going to zoom out all the way to try and find out where this is, and I'm going to pinpoint a location. So it's outside of Madison, under the 75. Okay. So this is the 75. Where's Madison at? Madison is right there. Okay, then I need to find the 6. Let's see. So, okay. State Highway 6 and then the 143. It seems like it's off the 143. So I'm triangulating, which basically means I'm trying to find that road of where this is. Okay, so 143, 6. Okay, this property's right there. It's sold. So again, pretend it didn't sell already, and we're doing this without that. I'm going to go look at what's sold around it. Okay, the best comps, this is super important when you're doing comps. Okay, number one, you want to look at sold comps first. Like what actually sold in that area. Okay, like if you just look at what's for sale, the price can be radically different, right? We're seeing stuff going 40, 43, 30, 50. Well, let me just show you what happens when you go to just for sale. People listen at 75, 150, right? Like a lot of these things are, they're just jacking up the prices. A lot of people who aren't land investors, they don't know how to price land. They price it way too high, and that's why it takes so long to sell. So we don't want to use for sale comps unless we have to, meaning like there's no sold comps. But we would look at pending comps before that. So anyways, I'm going to look at sold last year, okay? If there's nothing in the last year, you can go 2 years back, but ideally you really want it to be a year. And then I'm going to look around. Okay, like what's close? Okay, this is close. This sold for 40,000. All right, let's see it. This is a 6 acre that sold for 40. And so I want to get the price per acre. So what I'm going to do is I just take 40,000, so the amount sold for, divided by 6. It sold for 6,666. Okay, and I like to get an idea how long did it take to sell, right? Because that can kind of give me an idea. Okay, so this was listed back in November, and it didn't sell until April. So what is that? November, December, Jan, Feb, March, April. So that took 5 months, and I think they just priced it too high. You can see they went from 13 or 53 all the way to 40. That's a $13,000 difference. That's too high, right? If they had priced it just at 40, it would have gone faster. And just to show you, on March 5th, they dropped to the 47.5, and then it went pending basically like 2 weeks later. Right? So that means they're more in the ballpark on price. Okay. That's why it's so important to do this. Now, this one, just to show you that the shape is not nearly as good as this, right? This is what's called a flagpole lot. I mean, it literally looks like a flagpole. It doesn't have as much road frontage as the property we're looking at. Ours has road frontage on both sides. So I think, for all intents and purposes, ours is nicer. Also, nothing to keep in mind when you're looking at this as a comp. So this right here is called a utility easement. Whenever you see like a big, fat, straight line, cut through with trees, it's where they have those big power lines, usually like transmission lines, stuff like that. That's not attractive to be backed up to that stuff. It's not a deal killer, but it usually kind of reduces the value a bit. I mean, you can see this property. It's got the transmission lines, and it's like a whole transmission plant next to it, right? So like that's not really attractive. Okay, so you want to keep that in mind. All right, so we got that. So that's a good comp. Okay, and then we got this out here. It's actually a property I sold. This went for $5,000 an acre. Okay, and it was kind of ugly. I had a transmission line running through it, etc. All right. And then we've got this out here. So this is a 5 acre that went for 50,000. So that went for 10,000 an acre. This looks pretty nice. I like to look at the photos to compare. So this has a good amount of road frontage. It's cleared, paved road. And that's the other thing you want to look at too, what you need a realtor to go out there is like, what's the condition of the road? Like, is it paved? Is it just gravel? Is it dirt? Right? Because that can kind of affect things. All right. So this is a good comp. Let's see. Remember, ours is 5 acres. So then we do some math. Okay. So you can see like this property that went for 6,666. If we do the math on that times 5, we might assume, okay, maybe ours goes for 33. However, and usually this is the thing about comps. You want to be conservative. Like you want to go towards the lower end of things and be a bit more pessimistic on your comps. What a lot of people do is, I'll give you an example. The property we're looking at right now is actually really nice. Okay, it's got good road frontage, it's great shape. So it's a little bit different. But let's say, we were looking at this property that I had sold. Okay, this is, it's nowhere near as nice. Yeah, it has road frontage, but it's a dirt road. It's got a transmission line cutting through it. Like there's a lot of ugly things about it. Like you can see the quality of this road is like, looks like a freaking beach. It's dirt road. It's not nice. It wasn't cleared. Like it's nowhere near as good. A lot of people get a property like that, and then the mistake they'll make is they'll see a comp like this of 50,000. They'll be like, oh, like it's gonna go for 50, right? And this was the same size as the one that I sold. 5 acres, 5 acres. Excuse me, 6 acres. So it's 1 acre difference. Not that much. Mine went for 30. This other one that was better went for 50. That's a big difference, right? And so people, it's called cherry picking. They basically look for the best comps and assume like, oh, it's going to go for this. Like they're too optimistic. You have to be more pessimistic when you're doing this because you're trying to be conservative. We're investing. Okay. So like that's the one thing that you need to keep in mind. All right. Now, I see a comp like this that went for 50,000. This is, I would say, the most similar to ours because of the road frontage, quality of the road, etc. But I think it's a bit high, right? But I also don't think ours is going to go as low as, this one that went for 6,666 an acre, or this one that went for 5,000 an acre, right? So maybe it goes a bit more, maybe like 7,000, potentially 8,000, right? That's kind of the ballpark I'm thinking in my head. So 7,000 times, we've got 5 acres, that means 35. 8,000 times 5 acres means 40, right? If I would list this, I'd probably put it up at 40, okay? Now, this one sold at 43, okay? So it actually did a bit better, right? If you want to see the time frame, it was listed on October 22nd, sold November 27th. Okay, I mean that's basically a month. That's good, right? It's a hot market. All right. Now the next thing that you're doing when you look at comps is you want to go to pending. Okay. The reason you want to look at pending is it gives you a pulse of like, hey, what's happening right now in the market? Okay. So you can see there is a 5 acre pending at 55. So if let's say I was going to go list the property that we're looking at right now and pretend it didn't sell. Well, this is pending at 55. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sell at 55, but it's pending at it. And this is pretty similar to ours, except this one is cleared. So that gives me an idea. Let's see the price drop. That maybe I could, list ours for a bit more. So, I mean, it's at 54 and then it went pending. It'll probably go for a bit less, probably around 50 or so. But if I was going to list the property, I'm going to take this into account and say, okay, well, this just went pending at 55. So maybe I can list mine, a bit more. Maybe instead of 40, I could try 45, right? Which is, what our client did. Let's go back to it, right? They listed at 45 and then they did a little price drop, okay? Because you could see that like this, the pending tells you what's happening in the market right now, okay? That's what's important. And then I also like to look at what is active in the area. So you got this at 75, like this is obviously priced way too high, right? And like this isn't like nearly as nice. Like this, someone just priced it way too high and they're probably just waiting, hoping they get something. The shape sucks, so it's like you don't want to do that. And what you're looking for when you do this is like you're trying to see, well, what's your competition, right? Because you have to imagine from the eyes of someone who's going to go buy the land, they're looking around at all these different, pieces of land and they're thinking, well, they're shopping for what's going to be the best in their budget, right? What's going to make the most sense for them. Well, you'd beat this one in price, okay? The 75, obviously, that's close. And then even with this, the 5.76 at 59, right? So like if you come in and you list yours, this is why we sell land so fast. This is the mistake people make, is that they don't price it aggressively. Like you could see everything is way overpriced, that's fine, but it's kind of crappy low. So 59, 75, right? Like you see stuff in the 60s, like most of the stuff is priced pretty high for the quality of the product. The type of land that we put on was nice, right? It had great road frontage. And so if you list at 45, like you're priced pretty competitively in the market. You want to be the most logical sale that someone's going to have. Meaning, if someone in this area is going to look for basically 5-acre lots, 5 to 10 acre lots, that you're going to have yours priced the most effectively, where they come in and say, oh, wow, like that's actually a great deal. Like, let's go look at that one. And then you're going to get more showings, right? Then you're going to get more offers, and then it's going to sell faster. So if you want your property to sell faster, you just have to list them lower. Like that's the secret here. What you never want to do is try and hold out, on the price. An example of what I think would be a bad idea that some people do is they may have seen this and said, hey, I think I could get this sold at 50,000, and they listed at 50, right? The problem with that is, what if that took 3, 4, 5, 6 months to sell, but they made an additional $7,000 or even $10,000? That's not worth it. Okay, let me tell you why that's not worth it. Because they have to wait to get that money to then reinvest it into their business. Whereas with our client, he sold it in a month. That means his cash conversion cycle, so the time he spent money on the marketing to getting it back, is a month, right? You can grow so much faster when you're getting your cash back faster. So if you extrapolate the math, if you sell your properties faster, even if you're making a little bit less, because you're getting money back in your business quicker, you can then put it back into marketing and scale the marketing to do more marketing, get more deals faster, make more money. Okay, that's why you want to sell stuff a bit below market value. Okay, now the next thing I just want to point out is there was good comps in this area. Okay, the other mistake people make is they'll look at comps on the other side of the county, which sometimes you have to if there's nothing around where you're at. Or the other reason you would have to do that is, let's say there's something very odd about your property, right? Like, let's say yours is you're looking at a landlocked property and the only landlocked comp is on the other side of the county. Well, then you would want to look at that because that's similar to yours. But when you have comps that are similar to yours in the same location that have sold recently, those are the best comps. So always work from where your property is outside. Okay, that's why I zoomed in first. And I said, what's around, right here. And then if I didn't have any comps, what I would have done is I would have started going out here, right? And out there. Okay, so it's simple. That's the process of comping. And then the next step, once you have that, you have the idea of what it's going to sell for, you get a realtor to go out there to look and confirm. Now, another note I want to point out is that just because a realtor says something, it doesn't mean it's the end all be all. When you're getting comps, especially in a new area, if you don't know a realtor out there, you should try and get 2 or even 3 realtor opinions, because one realtor can say this, another can say that. But at the end of the day, you got to trust your gut and your judgment. That's why you have to learn how to do this. A realtor generally has a different view where they are more incentivized to get the highest price, but not have it sell the fastest, because for them, they work on dozens and dozens of deals a month. They don't really care. For them, it's if it takes 6 months to sell, I don't care, right? For an investor, we want to turn our money quickly, okay? So that's the difference. So sometimes you'll get realtors who will be like, oh, I think you should put it a little bit higher. I always go lower than that. You're the one that makes the final call. The realtor works for you. So I hope this helps you out. See you in the next one.